But yes, welcome to NBT at Home, your home away from home. This is an extension of NBT's 51st season titled Beyond Walls. This is a 5-part conversation series with the creative community of NBT, and I'm your host, ChelseaDee. I'm an associate producer and co-curator with the National Black Theater, and here with me are a coalition of Black creative envisionists. And I call this a coalition because I feel we are coming together in alliance to begin to piece together what needs to come next. And this conversation, I think, is very important because I think we're going to get some hard and fast tools of how to approach these things. So I'm going to give some introductions. Mary E. Hodges, hello, is a director who is also an actor, dramaturg, and proud mom. She was a part of the groundbreaking Slave Play Broadway team as an assistant director, has directed newly commissioned work written by women, and has directed countless readings. Welcome, Mary. Good to have you in the building. We have with us Jerron Herman, dancer working in New York City. He's also a trustee for Dance USA and an art culture writer. He moderates discussions for artists and institutions, including a series he helped create named Access Check 2.0, Mapping Accessibility with the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation. Last year, he premiered solo works at the Whitney Museum, Dance Space Project, and Performance Space New York. Jerron has been featured on CBS, BuzzFeed, and Great Big Story about his work in disability art. Jerron Herman, what it do, boo, welcome. Claudia Alick, performer, producer, writer, and inclusion expert. And let me just say, yes. Alick has served as the founding artistic director of Spoken Word Productions, is a New York neo-futurist alum, and the Oakland Poetry Slam team. She is the former community producer at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival and directs audio plays, yes, such as the Grammy-nominated Hamlet. Alick is co-president of the board of Network of Ensemble Theaters and executive producer of the transmedia social justice company Calling Up. She consults and advises foundations and companies around the country. Yes. Welcome, Claudia. Antoine Hunter. A Bay Area native and an award-winning, internationally known African-American deaf, capital D, choreographer, dancer, instructor, speaker, and deaf advocate. Hunter is on the board of Dance USA and Drop Labs as an ambassador for deaf arts and travels the world lecturing at Kennedy Center's VSA, Harvard University, Duke University, National Assembly of State Arts, to name a few, Hunter has been featured on the front cover of Deaf Life, in Dance Spirit, Dance Magazine, CNN's Great Big Story, to name a few. He's president of the Bay Area Black Deaf Advocates and is the founder, artistic director of Urban Jazz Dance Company and has produced the Bay Area International Deaf Dance Festival since 2013. Okay. Do we understand what is happening? Do we understand? And we have our amazing ASL interpreters from All Hands in Motion. Jacinda and Kathleen, thank you so much for being here with us. So appreciate your work. This is just, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. All right, so this is the culmination of our time together. And though we are pivoting a bit, I think this final conversation is the perfect complement to our series on Afrofuturism and thinking about what comes next. Today, we're talking about imagining the future through the lenses of Blackness, disability culture, and the creative spirit of Beethoven. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. I want to start with our check-in, and our check-in questions we have 4 check-in questions project updates and things of that nature. But our first question is going to be our accessibility check-in. Are your accessibility needs being met? That's the first question of the day. Claudia, would you mind talking to folks about what is that question? What is its importance? Why do we ask it?
Yes, I got this practice from Grant Miller, and I have been encouraging everyone to integrate it into all of their meeting practices. It's a moment at the top of your meeting to interrupt the ableist assumption that the room is accessible for everyone. Generally, it is not, or it's also giving everyone in the space permission to state what their access needs will be so that the room or the space can adjust for them and everyone can work together.
Yeah, and it's such a helpful, I use it in rehearsals with actors as well, because it's a great way for people to say, this is how you can support me today. This is what's going to help me show up in the fullest way possible. So that's a part of our check-in question today. And our other question is thinking about last week's conversation on pleasure activism. What's one thing that's giving you pleasure? What's one thing that's bringing some feel-good yummies to your life? And the last question is, where are you seeing creative resilience in your community? And by community, I mean on your block, in your house. That could be as big or as large community as possible. Claudia, do you mind if I start with you, the check-in questions? Okay, sweet.
I have no idea how to manage my time, so just let me know if I've gone over. I have a physical disability that I have a muscle disorder. So that means sometimes I might look like I'm looking off, or I might have a twinge of pain and where I pull a face. I'm never pulling a face at anything anyone's saying. Other than that, all of my access needs are met. Well, actually, I'm having allergies, so you might see me dabbing with a tissue at my nose. It's that time of year. Other than that, all my access needs are met. Is this when I'm supposed to tell you things that are happening in my life? Okay, so I'm working with the Unsettling Dramaturgy cohort. So dope. Been working with them for about a year. They're a group of Crip and Indigenous dramaturgs. We do like this international online colloquium. And when the pandemic hit, we were like, wow, we have been for the past year developing a really intense, decolonized, and accessible way of gathering and collaborating online. We should share that with folks. We've done a series of 4 or 5 praxis sessions that we've been sharing with the community via HowlRound. I'm working with the Fury Factory Festival to help them create a digital online convening. With the network of ensemble theaters, we have this app called the Connector app, and we put it back into development to do a couple of tweaks to make it more useful for people right now with their lives as they are. And we've been holding online devising sessions to find the best ways to connect to Connector and to use Connector to connect with each other. So that's been a fun project. Again, stop me, I'll have a long list here. I've been advising the Northwest Artist Streaming Hub. They just started a new way of sharing artists' work online, Nash. They're a really special group, really excited to be working with them, and they've been centering accessibility from the very beginning, and that feels like a really important design function. Let's see. I acted in a play with Stream On. I was in Survival of the Illest last week. That was super fun by Angela Cariotis. So online hip hop theater. And that was part of the Stream On project. And I started a project called We Charge Genocide TV. On June 1st, we will be holding a launch party or a watch party where you will be able to get activated and informed about the fact that the United States is killing us. And we will also be using that to launch a website, wechargegenocide.tv, on Juneteenth. Those are some of the things I'm working on. Oh, and that stuff brings me joy, and it brings me so much joy to see y'all's faces. This brings me joy. And this is resilience. This is an example of the resilience that's happening.
Go ahead. Yes. Yes. That's awesome. Oh, I might need you to just type all that into the chat so I can find all those.
I should say one more other thing I've been doing. On Mondays, I have a peer exchange sort of drop-in thing where artists and producers can join for producing in an age of pandemic, where we exchange digital and transmedia producing tips and challenges.
Yes. Oh, resources, just resources, just resources. all the way around. Antoine, are you ready to do check-in?
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm feeling very blessed to have an opportunity for people to listen, like not just listen with your ears and your eyes, but with your heart as well, you know. And it's finding for, have this amazing real interpreter to feed and communicate with, the top of the professional people who express their art for a living, not just for a hobby, you know, but for their living. And usually sometimes we have interpreters that's like, but these two are awesome, so I can be able to understand what's going on. I'm feeling inspired. I'm not trying to work too hard to understand what's happening. So I feel good with that, you know. And so because of that, I'm getting my center. Because I'm in my center, feeling home, and not alone. So that, I'm home of the Black Panthers, which is the Oakland, like I said. We value, community, and so that having that community power to keep flame on fire if it's happening. So check in that.
All right. Any new projects? Any updates on projects you want folks to know about? Shameless self-promotion?
Mhm. Oh, thank you. The project I'm involved right now is deaf refuge. We're trying to learn about people who come here to be safe, here in America. And we're trying to interview many of those who are deaf that come, what their experience is like, because they have a voice and story too, you know. And the project, my home, turning the 15-year business office into a dance studio, so because I can't get out to the dance studios out there, I usually travel to teach, so I have to do it here. And that took me about 3 weeks to put up, the curtains and everything. That takes about 3 or 4 humans to put those up. So it's just me because I don't know who's gonna come in. I don't plan anything, and so then plumbing. I'm doing my own plumbing, That's my home. That's another project. That's the reality that I'm in, you know. It's like I became a handyman too, as well as an artist. And it is. So we have to do it ourselves. Um,
Yes.
building, and it's really wonderful because now I'm predicting how much more power do I have for myself, to do in the future. And I'm like, oh, I never would have took that, risk if I didn't have any opportunity. This is what I have to do, you know. So trying to keep remodeling the home to make it accessible for that community. Cause many, let me tell you, like for when everything shut down in California, for the first 3 weeks, there was no interpreters on the news and media, none. So it was like deaf people were going to work, acting like they was like, what's happening? What's going on? Where are the people? You know, and that can be very, very scary. And then to finally, after the 3 weeks later, finally getting interpreted in the media, you know, to the mayor, to the senator, them, what they're talking about, what's happening in our home, you know. So it's tough. So imagine now all the people that's online, they're not understanding what people are saying with no interpreter. So that means what for me? The community is relying on me to teach dance and art because I study and it's big. So 3 weeks was really tough. trying to build a home when I know my community needs me. But after today, I'll be teaching dance weekly and teaching sign language weekly. So that's my pleasure.
That's it, Antoine. It's just that. It's that community resilience. It's that seeing the need and answering that call. So thank you. That's super badass. Excuse my language. Pardon my French. But I'm impressed. Jerron, talk to us. What's poppin'?
Hey, ChelseaDee, and everyone. This is Jerron speaking. I'm gonna increase this practice a little bit too. I forget sometimes to also describe myself. So I'm a dark-skinned Black man with kinky hair, and I'm wearing a kind of tote constructed T-shirt with some lime green accent, and I'm sitting in my room. And I think that I'm feeling good. I feel a sense of my ritual in quarantine has actually started, wherein I'm expecting the walls that I have, and I've really started to accept them and to create them. But at the same time, I was so fortunate not to have lost anything in my practice. Nothing really postponed or was parlayed to later. It just transitioned to online. The series on accessibility and access culture that I've been curating with the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation has been going strong. And we're at a point where we're about to get into like a 4th extra session with some folks and think about language and constructing a survey for the field. So that's really exciting. And then I've been working with Kinetic Light with the lead artiste Alice Shepard and Laurel Lawson and Michael Mag, wonderful disabled artists. And we're constructing the world premiere of this new work called Wired, which is about the untold and undertold history of barbed wire in America, and all of its implications for how it's been gendered, racialized, and how it's impacted the disability community as well. So it's ain't light, and and we are going as deep as necessary. If y'all know Alice Shepard, she don't suffer no fools. So we're really tackling it. The premiere is supposedly supposed to it's still on its way. It's still coming. As well, in terms of pleasure activism, it has been a really extreme pleasure to think about advocacy and usefulness. I've been really kind of thinking about those really usefulness as a verb for myself, or as a moniker for myself, and trying to figure out how to be useful. And thankfully, I was able to join a little renegade cohort of other disabled artists in this self-contained experiment with distributing funds to folks in our community. So Crip Fund has been going on for like the last three months, and a fantastic exercise. It's since sunsetted, so we're thinking about a next version, next phase, which would include a lot more people. But it was extraordinary to oftentimes I'm not the one. I guess my perception of activism has really been superficial, or I haven't really had a march in the street moment or a sit-in moment, and even that because of course, and if we think about the ableist history around protests in itself, like there are other reasons why I wasn't checking for it, but nevertheless, how do you raise your voice? How do you stand in the gap? How do you answer that call, as Antoine demonstrated? That was something I was still trying to figure out as an artist, as a Black man, as a disabled Black man. So was really excited about this crit fund, and I'm hoping that it continues, and I'm hoping that other people do kind of take that up as well. I know that there are so many funds out there, and I think like that is one of the ways in which we are so resilient, and we're seeing resilience, wherein people are saying, the power, again, with what Antoine was speaking to, this power is redistributed in a different way. Like, we're not waiting for someone else to do it. We are activating our communities, asking our communities first what they need, and then fulfilling the need from our own pockets, from our own intention. So that's been really lovely. Yeah. So and we're good. And access checks are, everything is good. I'm feeling good. I might be swiveling my left arm around to like keep it, but everything else is great. Thank you.
Oh man, I love what you say about usefulness and this idea of how do we make our art, how do we make ourselves useful at a time like this, because the urgency is so, it's just so now, it's so impactful. So yeah, I've definitely been grappling with that question myself, Jerron, like really grappling. Okay, Mary, let's check in.
I just love this. I'm learning from all of you, and I'm like taking notes. Is the room accessible? I'm going to implement that going forward, because I think you just kind of assume everyone's taking care of themselves. And this whole old way of notion of, what is it? Don't ask, don't tell, or it's not my business. I don't want to offend. So then you don't say anything. So I love that you start the conversation or the rehearsal or whatever it is by saying, is everyone okay in their space? Do you have what you need? So I'm going to take that on going forward. So thank you. I love learning new things. So, and to answer that question, I am fine in my space. So there's that. Pleasure activism. You know, I struggle with that because twofold. The pleasure part of the word is like, I feel like I'm always like in the thick of it or doing something that I don't think about the pleasure if I'm getting pleasure from it. So that's something else I need to start making note of. Not that I'm saying that things don't bring me joy. It's just taking a moment to realize that it is bringing me joy. But I'm always, you know, so I often will not think about the pleasure part of it. And as far as the activism part, I feel like, again, and maybe this has been selfish all these years on my part, that I'm so like in the thick of whatever all my stuff is. I don't think that I'm being an activist per se. But then when I think about the things and projects I've been a part of, I guess I am. And or the point of not wanting to take on all these mantles, because I feel like, okay, I'm a single Black parent, I'm a woman, and I'm Black, and I'm an artist, and I'm all these things. And so I was like, that's enough. Why do I need to add something else on top of it? But then you can't deny when people come to you and they're seeking your skill sets or your expertise, or they need you in the room. So that's been happening, but I've never really thought of it as activism. Listening to you all speak, I'm a board member on the League of Professional Theater Women. And I'm soon to be, I guess I can announce it here, I'm going to be one of the co-presidents of the League of Professional Theater Women. And I don't know how many women they've had like me that were co-presidents. And also in my age range demographic who's been on the board. And it's been quite enlightening. And we quickly founded a new committee. It was first called EDI, but then we, which means equity, diversity, inclusion. And then we decided recently to add the A for accessibility. And then we were tasked with coming up with a new mission statement that we feel that was lacking, that represented who the League of Professional Theater Women is and where they're going forward in the future. And so I had to do all of this. There was 4 of us that make up this committee, and we're all from different backgrounds. And we started doing research, and we put this mission statement together. And so I just feel like I'm still learning in the accessibility word itself. And what does inclusion mean? Looking at all of those different things versus stereotypical things. Let's go a little bit deeper. And who do we want, who should be able to access the League of Professional Theater Women? And it's kind of, we need to bring it up to date. And that's kind of part of what my pleasure activism is. And also, I'm going to add that under that pleasure activism. And then I think it's close to home for me, right? So working with my son, being out in the country and out of the city is very different for him. And I'm on my property that my father built from nothing. And in this old house, and my mother's widowed and she's here by herself. So it's a great opportunity about roots and not being afraid to go out the door because there's bugs or insects, right? So it's like, oh no, you go out there. This is your property. This is your legacy. This is what my father worked so hard to provide. You don't have to be afraid to go out the door. So for me, that's pleasure activism in itself with my son and being on this land and seeing that there are trees and forests like around you, and to go outside to see myself gardening, to see his grandmother gardening and planting food. So that is my big top, probably pleasure activism, you know. And my mom's a go-getter, you know. She's like, come on, let's go outside, Mary. I'm like, I'm sitting in the house with my ebook, right? No, let's take advantage of this time. Let me learn, you know, from her. And I just love looking at all of the trees, all of the things that my father loved, that you take for granted when you're growing up. So that's that. And then as far as creative resilience, I'm a part of a group, a small community that Camille Howard put together. And we call ourselves the Black Diaspora Play Exchange. And so what we do is we get together on Mondays and we dig deep into the archives of Black plays that are not in necessarily the literary canon. And some of them are hard to find. And so we have a group of artists, and it's closed. We don't advertise what we're doing. We don't invite, you know, the public in. We just get together every Monday at noon and we read a play. So the plays are picked out, and Camille does the casting and we mix it up. And we read, not only do we read the plays, but then we have this discussion. We hold space and have discussion about what's going on in this play, and why do you think this play isn't being done, and how does it relate to what we're going through right now? So it's been a beautiful thing every Monday. And then I'm working with various, you know, writers who've reached out, who are working on new work. And so then I just wear my dramaturge hat and we have fun. They send me pages and we'll arrange a call or a Facebook video chat in person. And we work on pages, and some are further along than others, depends on what the writer wants to do. And we'll gather some artists together and we'll read pages, and then they go away and the writer and I work until, you know, this is the time to work on, you know, I think things that mean something to you. People have been maybe afraid in the past, who feel, okay, now I'm sitting at home and it's safer for them to hold space digitally than I think people haven't imagined that it could hold a safe space for some people. So.
Thank you, Miriam. I love what you're describing with building a place, planting these seeds, exposing your son to true liberation, to being able to feel safe enough to rest, feel safe enough to play, feel safe enough to walk and explore. And I feel like that's that mundane Afrofuturist vibe that I'm like, yeah, that's the next thing. The next thing is we're in a thriving place where we feel safe. We feel safe enough to eat when we're hungry and sleep when we, are tired, and we don't feel under attack constantly. So I think this is really, there's a thread in there of gardening, of growing your food, of really claiming your land, and developing. So amazing stuff. Thank you all for just sharing all the amazing, y'all are like so busy in the midst of all of this. Everyone's like answering the call, the urgency to get out there and do something and build and sow the seeds of what's going to happen. So exciting. All right, so intro of today's topic. Basically, the premise that I've been exploring with Afrofuturism is this idea that Afrofuturism is any time a Black person is imagining a space beyond or time beyond right now, and that imagination is a radical act of envisioning the future, something that you can't necessarily see. Perhaps there isn't evidence that it exists, but you are still envisioning it and manifesting. So I call us a cohort of envisionists because I feel that we are here, we are thinking of what is going to come next, we are envisioning what is going to come next, and that is how we're going to manifest it. So this conversation is very important. I hope you understand. So Blackness, disability culture, and Beethoven. How do we find ourselves in this conversation? So originally, the National Black Theater was partnered with the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, Lincoln Center, as part of Carnegie Hall's citywide arts festival, celebrating the music and the life of Beethoven. And so naturally, the question for the National Black Theater is, Blackness and Beethoven, how? And of course, we've heard, Beethoven's secretly Black, right? He's got these Black roots, and like his mother was Spanish during the Moors occupation, so that's how she got the African roots. And so I mean, I understand the desire to want to bring Beethoven into just claim him, give him an invitation to the cookout. But I just don't know if the evidence is there, y'all. I just gotta be honest. I don't know. So we had to find a different way into talking about Beethoven and Blackness. And fortunately, we were able to get a hold of some of his compositions and manuscripts from a particular piece that he was composing during the time where he was diagnosed with losing his hearing. And so we got to see the composition. We got to read his diary, where he writes about going to the doctor and being diagnosed and trying to find assistive devices and trying to finish this composition, and just the emotional turmoil that he was in. And yet this singular clarity of, this piece has to be finished. This composition has to be done. No matter what the diagnosis is, I have to express myself creatively at the end of the day. Like, that's just, a compulsion. So we were starting to think, okay, interesting. We're starting to see something here. We're starting to see some resilience of the gift of creativity. And what are some more points of connectivity? That is when we met Claudia Alick. And Claudia came in and just so helped to frame this conversation. You gave us a foundation. You gave us something to build off of, that I think articulated what we were intuiting. So Claudia, if you wouldn't mind, if you could talk to us about the social model of disability, like what that is, where it comes from, what it means.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to give you a full history of it. Y'all Google it. But I will say this. I, in my own practice, use the terminology, I am a disabled artist. The thing I work on is disabled justice. Why? Because society is what disables me. The theater space is what disables me. If the theater doesn't have a ramp, that is what is disabling me. Stairs are assistive devices for people who cannot fly. Ramps are assistive devices for all of us. Why not start there? So it's a political choice to use the identifier of disabled, and that's a little ghost of the social model of disability. I don't think I gave you a full definition though, so Google it.
Yes, and I have a little thing here that I'm gonna read. But I think that what you said is just so super important. Or does someone have?
But the point is what you were saying. Many people, they ask, what do you need? What do you need in a particular situation? Being disabled, the problem is not the disability itself, no. It's the situation. That usually what you need to look at really is the situation. There are so many beautiful people out there that you're speaking about. For example, maybe somebody who's a piano player, but they have the ability. Some people can see, some people can't see. You have someone who maybe have vision. Some people are able to smell, some people can't smell, but you have to be creative. So remember,
y'all know the man on the moon?
oh,
You know, he had to envision how to get to the moon, right? You got to do things that that society think that we're not able to do. And people think we're dumb, but we're not, you know? And like Claudia said earlier, which was beautiful, you know, she hopes that she doesn't want people to take it in an offensive way, but if, you know, suppose we're in another country, right? Another country takes the time to learn the language of English. So they learn English, and so they're obviously capable of learning several things, several languages. The humanity should do that, but a lot of people don't take the time to learn about humanity. And so that's typically how I feel. And it was a beautiful thing you said where, you know, you're like, hey, go ahead and do your homework, Claudia. Go Google it, you know. That's beautiful.
I was less telling people do your homework and more acknowledging that my definition that I shared was possibly incomplete. And it was an invitation for others to continue self-educating. I know I'm Googling and self-educating and speaking with others all the time. This is a continuing project.
Yeah. I would also like to add that inclusion of your own community with disabled people is also essential to understanding the extent to which the social model is interpreted or expressed, so that there can be theory and there can be practical application. And if you don't have anyone in your group, in your community that references that social model, it will also be incomplete, your understanding of it.
Yes, and I think what's really wonderful about the model, the social model of disability that was so influential for me is the idea of how society is constructed in and of itself, which disables people. And so I started to think about race, right? So if race is a construct, if race is something that we're building an entire society around, and people are being kept out of, not having access to resources, having entire systemic disadvantage laid out for them, right, for over generations, what kind of relationship does that create with the society that you're in? What kind of relationship does that create with yourself and your artistry? What kind of relationship, Jerron, as you were just saying, does that create between you and people within your community? So this social model of disability really blew the lid wide open for me in terms of thinking about the intersections of Blackness, disability culture, classical musical culture, you know, art and its associations with the elites and people being separate from, you know what I mean? So if we could just go around and maybe we can start with Jerron, if you'd be willing to talk about this a little bit, the intersections in your experience between Blackness and disability culture. Do you see like resonances of experience? Are you, what has been your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. It's like, this is such like a talk show. Thanks, Chelsea. I love it. So I find such parallels between the Black community and the disability community and capital D deaf community in its expression of rights. You know, it just there was a ingrained and understood permission or desire to be visible, to be seen, and to disrupt, like including yourself in the structure of humanity that is not for you, necessarily lets them know that you're not included. There's this like, because you're there, they know that you weren't there. And the histories that I haven't reached the, you know, I haven't researched a lot, but I do know that there are so many stories, like disabled people creating their own curb cuts and, you know, chaining themselves to buses. And of course the 404 amendment, was it the 404 or 403? I can't remember which number it was. The amendment to the ADA that was a sit-in. And all of that is about being visible, about being seen. So that when the Black community has all these similarly has these understandings of visibility, that I think that it inherently talks to, I am seen, I therefore am human, I therefore am viable and can give you my culture, you know. And so I think that there is a really parallel and held sense for both communities that their culture is a part of their identity, and so that when their products are being given or products are being shown or exhibited, that there's it's in order to disrupt the society that did not include them in the beginning.
Yeah, I think I love this. I am seen, therefore I am a part of the human experience, and by virtue of me being present, I am showing what was missing before. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
I don't know if I'm speaking to that, but I will say that this is Claudia speaking based on what Jerron just shared. The entire disability rights movement was based on all of the learnings of the civil rights movement. So the country collaborated, devised this magnificent civic performance of helping the United States to be a little less white supremacist and toxic. And the disabled community went, oh, you can make change like that? We should do that too. So there are deep connections between the movements for racial justice and the movements for disabled justice. But there are also a lot of moments of intersectionality where the two communities don't always have shared practices, which is one of the things I tend to work on.
amazing. Thank you, Jerron and Claudia, for really drawing those parallels, because I feel like it's easy for us to go, oh, well, that group over there is dealing with that thing, and I don't have anything to do with that, so that's over there, as opposed to coalition, coming together and finding all of these creative solutions. And a second ago, Antoine, you mentioned creativity as being the best bet to finding solutions and creating solutions. And I was actually listening to someone, Dr. Sean Jenwright, is his name. And he was talking about, if we are going to be solution oriented, then we're only going to be constantly grappling with the problem, as opposed to envisioning into the future to see something to create something where that problem doesn't even exist anymore. So how are we, instead of fixating on fixing this thing that's happening now, how do we think about where do we find ourselves so that we're not even that thing that we're constantly trying to plug that leak. We're gonna figure out how to fix that whole boat, how to create a whole new way of travel. So this is very important. Was there anyone who wanted to throw in a final thought? If you want to just raise your hand or throw in a final thing. All right, sweet. Let's keep this moving. So thinking about speaking of the language around experience and how we're talking about things, I know for me, I was very nervous about how do I speak in a way that's not going to offend? How do I frame this event? How do I pitch this event to these artists without doing something that's going to make people feel uncomfortable or feel like put on the spot or feel like they're being displayed? And Claudia, again, blew my mind with the introduction of this concept of inspiration porn. And I really started to think about, how are we framing our approach to this event? What's the line between celebrating what makes us different and coming together in coalition to find creative solutions versus putting someone on display for other people's entertainment or education? So Claudia, could you talk to us about what is inspiration porn? And then I'd love to go around and hear people's experience with it, your definition, what you think maybe the dangers of inspiration porn could be in terms of us really coming to an understanding with each other. So just take it away, Claudia.
Again, this is not a dictionary definition. My experience of the things that I label as inspiration porn are stories about disabled people that are usually shared by non-disabled community to create a story of sympathy or feeling good feelings for the abled community. So they're actually supremely ableist stories that are meant to make the able-bodied feel really good about themselves. Oftentimes the inspiration porn story is, disabled person was grocery shopping. Isn't that inspirational? It's like, well, actually you just took a photo of somebody just living their life and then advertised it. It's extractive and exploitative and creepy. And I often have been made into involuntary inspiration porn where my participation or presence in an event was suddenly lifted up in some odd way. I would love to hear from my colleagues though. What do you think inspiration porn is? And is there another word for it?
So this is Jerron speaking. In my experience, because I present sometimes like not very disabled people, I've had experiences where that I became complicit in not creating a really accessible environment, and that my entry was seen as like, we did a good job. We're on the right track because we included him, who is at a point of the spectrum that is representative, but then also not the extent of the community. So gatekeeper, what have you. There's this. So I experienced that aspect, and even more so, I think, because I don't use devices or use things that can be typically legible for disability, there's a danger in dismissing the extent of access that people need, or dismissing the interactions that can spur accessible and inclusive environments. So it's like, you see me, that doesn't necessarily mean you see everyone. And I think that there's a danger in how I operate. So the individuality, similarly, Claudia, is of people in the community is extracted. And we continue to think of a monolith versus a community, a spectrum, and that there are many voices. So there's also, with inspiration, there's a way in which kind of you're pinpointing and pointing at a community singularly.
And Jerron, just to build off of that a bit, we had a really illuminating conversation at the beginning of this curatorial journey, shall I say, where we were talking about the name of the event, Can and Able, the resilience of the gift. And you mentioned putting able in the title of the event. Is that centering, or is that revealing that we are centering a particular perspective as opposed to, you know, something else? So could you just speak a little bit about what you were pointing out to me that day?
Sure. I think this comes to what Mary was talking about earlier with this idea, I'm already so many things, that this other moniker that actually is not very critically understood in our community still it opens up a lot of misinformation, and people have varied interpretations of the word able, actually. And and that when it's placed in a connotation with a disabled person, I think it just references the undercutting myth of inspiration, which is one of overcoming, and that resilience is actually an action that we should aspire to, right? Like, we have to overcome where we are. We have to be able. We can, and we could be able. It does limit. There's this amazing to think about the Black community. There's this amazing interview with Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin where they're talking to each other and talking about the differences of their generations. And Nikki talked to Jimmy about about how she wants to feel close to Black men again. Like, sure, that she doesn't, that there's been this generational wave of putting a Black woman in her place, and so therefore she cannot critique the Black man anymore. She can't critique, but also this idea of that love is something that has been kind of politicized. Like, she wants to feel love no matter who is in her corner, but that because a Black man has been historically, maligned and pressured and all these things, that his actions to her are justified when they're not. You know what I'm saying? So that, like, we've extracted what can happen in the individual sphere because of, like, the societal rancor. So that was really interesting, and I think it happens with the disabled community 100%, wherein we have done the business of, okay, we're attaching this idea to you, but not thinking about you and the potential of variety. So I think it just kind of recapitulates the wheel of, like, man, this is we're supposed to be somewhere that we're not right now. Whereas I think that where I am physically and mentally and artistically are interesting, and there's a vocabulary and literacy that is unknown, and I'd like to push that a little bit more than this place. I mean, it does. I'm sorry to kind of ramble, but it does. The idea of futurism does complicate this, because I am supposed to be aspirational. I am supposed to aspire to somewhere. It's just that I'm not supposed to aspire to a context that's already been created, right? So we've already said, like, able-bodiedness is inherently good. We've already said like that's a place of security, and we've asked and told disabled people that that's your arc to get to a place of little disability. So maybe I'm saying that my aspiration is to go over that kind of storyline.
Yep.
And I'm done.
Yup. And I mean that's all so so juicy. There's like so many threads in here of like, this is why these kinds of conversations are super important. And I just also want to say thank you so much for your patience in this learning curve. You know, NBT and myself, as we figured out how do we talk about this. You know, I suddenly understood, when you're dealing with predominantly white institutions and then they want to talk about Blackness or something like that, and you can feel the like hesitancy and like, I don't want to say anything to offend, and then that ends up shutting down the conversation, and we don't end up illuminating what could really be helpful to us. So thank you again. Thank y'all. Kelly do Kelly. So we talk about disability culture, Blackness, the intersections of those things. And now I'm gonna layer in Beethoven. Like, how did Beethoven get in the mix of this and spur these things on? So what I want to show right now is some images of the manuscripts of Beethoven's composition. And so, like we said earlier, when he was composing this piece, he was in the process of losing his hearing. And so we saw these compositions and we're like, oh my goodness, this is, we've never seen Beethoven this way. We've never conceived of Beethoven as somebody who is processing his humanity. We usually see him on the pedestal, lifted up as, you know, one of the icons of European culture, but we're not seeing this internal life of someone who is really coming to a place of their struggle, but there's something on the other side of that. So let me just share my screen so that you can see. Chaka, 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 chaka. Okay. So here are some visuals of the original composition. And you can just see it's almost like you can see the creative process. You can see thoughts coming and going, and things are off the line, you know, they're not quite in alignment, and yet this creative process is still happening. And so we really, it's really illuminating to see these images for us. All right, I'll come out of that. But so yeah, those were some of the images that we shared with artists to give a sense of the inspiration for the event. And if anyone, maybe Mary, can I start with you? If you could just give your initial reaction to getting an email from the National Black Theater about Beethoven and Blackness and this composition, you know, what was your initial response?
I don't know. I was like, it's vast, right? So then I think what I, as a director, I have to think about images, pictures, what immediately comes to my mind, what comes to my gut, what images. Okay, I'm thinking, okay, this man couldn't hear, but then he's writing these compositions. And then what NBT represents and your activism, and bring it. It's like, okay, what, and then I started thinking about, and then the resilience of the gift, right? I think the resilience of when I think about that, and I think about our people, that's easy to me. That's not complicated. And then we are celebrating, was it his 250th birthday in Opus 97, which is, I think it's 4 movements. And then the whole thing of not hearing. And then it came to me, I thought about the juxtaposition. Okay, So I could have easily have thought, okay, let me put something beautiful and lovely together. We'll have like a Black pianist, you know, play, because it was a micro commission. Forgot that, Chelsea. This was a micro commission. So we were restricted to 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes. So this is a mini performance based on, look at this sheet music, listen to Opus 97, which is a huge piece of music, and what to do with that. So yeah, it was, oh my God. And then it was also, I love a challenge. I love a challenge. What can I do that would be visually interesting to people coming in saying, what the heck, why is National Black Theater help celebrating 250th birthday of Beethoven? Why? So then I wanted to know, if I came into that space, this is something maybe that I would want to see. So I thought about the frustration of, instead of focusing so much on how lovely the music is and how Beethoven operating out of privilege, because he was commissioned by a young duke at that, who he was friends with. And then, but also the challenge of, I can't hear what I'm writing. So then I thought about Aaron, for some reason, from Titus Andronicus, and a passage of text of who he is when he is operating on somewhat a false sense of privilege, being that he was the lover of Tamara. And here he is, this Black man, this Moor, this mighty warrior, but yet he was still a slave. And then when Tamara has a baby by him, the baby is instantly like looked at as Black and ugly, and is sent out to be torn apart. But Aaron says no. He steps in, and then his humanity comes in, and he talks to his baby, and he talks about this baby being a slave. And then I was like, okay, is this reaching a bit about taking some of this text and meshing it in with some of what Beethoven wrote in some of his letters? But then a lot of the ideas that I had were visual. And then when I watched you, Antoine, I watched like some of your work from like YouTube, and I was like, oh man, that's exactly kind of what I imagined of this Black Beethoven, while some of the music was playing. And of course, I was going to have a live musician, and we also were going to have a live interpreter during this micro commission. But I was going to have an artist visually embody and not speak at all. Because what's the point of I think again, I'm sorry if I'm rambling, because I see it all in my head, and it's hard to share what it was that I imagined this event would be. But if you've seen Antoine move, that's what I imagine this Black Beethoven would come into the space, and you'd have these weird, unnatural movements. And there's also a friend of mine who suffers from tinnitus. What do you call it when you have the buzzing in the ear? And he constantly hears noise, and I can't imagine what that sound is, what silence would be, and what is a buzzing constantly in your ears, what that is like. Or we talked about hidden disabilities, right? And so I wanted to, with the micro commission, I wanted to visually have a Black Beethoven, not making a political statement, but just embodying that. Why not have it be a brown body, embody it, and have bits of live music that was not necessarily lovely part of the opus, and distort it in a way. But we weren't able to do it. But I wanted to work with a voiceover actor on some of the text of what would have played over some of the visual action if we were to do the piece. But I just thought it was interesting about what we think of what resilience and creativity is. And when we talk about, you know, our white brothers and sisters and in comparison to what we've all been through, and what, as Jerron had said, like what people, of going over that. I'm more interested of going over and not necessarily thinking of what is a logical narrative, but visual.
Antoine, did you know that you were inspiring Mary's work in this way?
No, I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. I have to say something about that, but really, I grew up in a church, and you know, and when growing up in a church, when they said, you know, you're deaf, it felt like it was a curse, you know. And I was being prayed on almost every time I went to church, you know, that my hair started stretching longer, you know, I mean, you know what I mean? When I was praying, and because they were searching for a miracle, and it was like, you know, wait a minute, you know, I am that miracle, you know. I'm able to hear things that others can't hear and understand. I was able to connect and make the word together so people they understand, you know. And it got me into the interesting places because Black and then deaf. And deaf people understood me, you know, and then some Black people understood me, and some deaf people began to not understand me because I'm Black too. That's a big group of people being involved, having opportunities in art, mostly white, you know, and or opportunity as Black deaf with this small in education, opportunity to go out and see things and learn more. So I didn't know about Beethoven. I didn't know about, you know, and as a dancer, you know, when I got here written words, the pictures, the scores, I started to say, oh, that's his language. He had to come up with his own language. And I have to be feeling like I'm in between deaf and Black. And hold up, I have a new language, Black deaf. You know what I mean? With Black deaf, we have our own ASL, our own sign language, that Black deaf, you know? And it was really quite interesting that when you start to understanding and having more patience, that different people have their own language, we begin to grow, you know. We should have a bit more patience to understand each other, but we keep getting disconnected because we don't understand, but make it as a whole, you know. And taking the score, I move in a language where Antoine moved, you know. And that language, I'm going to tell you that it was just recently after 20, 30 years that people finally say, I'm getting to understand you. I'm understanding your language. You know what I mean? Before that was stop. Deaf people don't do that. Wait, stop. You know, and put it in the cage, you know, stuck. While the other deaf will have opportunity. You know, sometimes deaf people get together. They have a national deaf association, if I say it right. The National Association of the Deaf. That big talking about civil rights. Talk about we need more opportunities. But Black people were banned to be involved in that. Black deaf were banned. So until recently, so we got out, you know, that we have opportunity to vote and be part, you know, and so now we're together, you know, appreciate that. But whoa, we're even more behind, and now we're coming back, you know. Black deaf, we're getting wrong because people wasn't taking the time to learn our language, our culture. And because we had to teach the language, we didn't have enough time to teach our art. I have to keep teaching the culture, and not be able to teach my art. But now it started coming together, you know. And I'm like looking at Beethoven, I'm like, wait a minute now, you know, it's really cool. It's a new language. I had to be patient. Fortunately, I could read some music a little bit. So I'm like, oh, I want to participate in that, you know. It's something I want to connect and get in deep in the root. And that language, I think this language, I really want to explore, you know, to investigate. Because I want to challenge the world as a dancer, as a Black deaf dancer, you know, how can you receive the information that we're presenting out? You know what I mean? Now, as an artist, though, I don't have to care. You know, but after them, I want people to take the time to build a bridge to being connected all together, you know what I mean? Because I know what it's like to be not included. You know, in my dance company, our priority is what? Accessibility. That's our priority. Before we even walk on the stage, we want to make sure that there's wheelchair, you know, accessible, make sure it's interpreted for deaf and blind, make sure you have captions, make sure you have an interpreter, you know, make sure that the bathroom are gender neutral, you know, that's a different conversation. But I want to be included for all. That's the same conversation in the parallel. And, you know, I have to remind my Black people, I'm Black too, because sometimes they see deaf only because I'm signing. And that's my real first language, sign language, Black sign language, you know. So it's just a beautiful thing now, 2020, we start to see more people understanding Black sign language, and now we can include that into art. What? What?
Ah, that's just so powerful. So incredibly powerful. Claudia, did you just come off mute?
I did, because I wanted to share a short observation and a shout out for National Black Theater. So I got in a lot of trouble when I was in grade school, because I went to school and I insisted that Beethoven was Black, and I was going to grade school in Montana. None of the teachers were open to that knowledge. And then I went home and my mom was like, oh, all those white teachers don't know anything. You have to, you know, you're just gonna have to do what they want you to do so you can get them A's. Then you come back to me and I'll let you know what's up. So when you offered this project and said, oh, can you give us your reflections on it? My first instinct was, oh my gosh, my mama was right. Beethoven was Black. So thank you for giving some more science and knowledge about that particular issue. But I was just so happy that your first step was to come to the disabled community and to come to Black disabled community to speak about what we need. Because oftentimes these planning areas, they're siloed, and they are only for one piece of the community. So it's only white disabled justice that's taking place, or only Black justice. And I was so excited that you were creating an event that would force you to have justice for all of us. I love it.
Again, you know, I keep not bringing my tissues into the kitchen when I do this, so y'all keep really catching me with my, you know, y'all keep catching me. But
Church,
you know what I mean? Just take me there, okay? I just quickly wanted to learn the sign for bridge, like building a bridge. What is the sign for that in ASL?
Well, one more time, slowly.
To build a bridge.
Oh, bridge.
Bridge. Am I doing it the right way? Maybe do I do it this way? Bridge. Yeah, that's what we need. Bridges. Bridges and new language. New language. I mean,
beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the part of this conversation, I want to talk about how we use our art form to share what we're experiencing. You know, a very specific experience that we're experiencing that also can connect to a very global perspective. I think a lot of times as artists of color, as marginalized artists, we get the image that your specific story is not going to be universal. So you're going to have to change something about it to make it quote unquote more universal. But you know, I feel like we are intuitively as coalition pushing back against that and saying our experience, our specific experience is valid and will connect. So let's just go ahead and build that bridge and get it out there. So I just would love to go around and maybe Antoine, we can start with you. How do you use your art form as a way to share what you're experiencing?
Like I said, you know, the first one, accessibility is so important before we even walk on stage. You know, our world, many theaters, is not really accessible to feel the music and feel what people are saying, you know. So like my festival, Bay Area International Deaf Dance Festival, we drill like a buckers, whatever how you say it. Well, butt kickers, there you go. And you put it on there, yes. You put it there, and then it starts vibrating when the music comes down. We have a special, unique speaker that face different ways, you know, different way for the artist, because sometimes the audience can feel their music, but not the artist, you know? So we have a special one where it's not too loud, but you can feel it, have the woofers down, you know? And we just try to change the environment first. We have to change the environment, everything. We built it in. And we hope from there on, after we leave the theater, that they will do that for other people, you know, because in this America, just about 13% of people who are deaf, you know, and most of those deaf people have hearing families. And so have a family show together from one and one are missing out on so much. So you have to take care of that environment. Yeah, you know, you have to tell me that question again one more time. So I get.
I mean, those were really great. I mean, I was just asking for how do you use your art form to share what you're experiencing? And you were talking about the subwoofers and being like, I'm experiencing this rhythm, you know, and I'm gonna make sure that the space is able to provide that for people. So you gave a really great answer, unless you want to add more.
Definitely, because unfortunately, the stage and environment, I have to work on that. Now I can do my art, you know, I mean, create assets. Now I can talk about the art. So for the art form, my dancers, you know, many of them are deaf. We require more time. You know, it's not like hearing dance company where they can talk while you're moving, and talk, and then listen and moving. You can't see me. But with deaf, we need to see each other. And we have deaf with disability. Now some people say, well, you know, why is that separate? Well, some deaf, they feel that it's genetic, passed on, it's the other, it's a culture. They can do everything. It's still some. They feel it's the disability for them. I think that's identity. That's all the identity. You know. So in my work, I'm signing and moving. I'm finding different kinds of deaf people with different kind of disability to make the work. You know. Some deaf to hear the bird, but not the motorcycle. Some hear the motorcycle, but not the bird. So the bird is a hearing level, you know. And now I'm gonna tell you, because we don't have an opportunity, how many professional deaf dancers I'm gonna find? not a lot. So my work, my process require me to keep looking and looking and looking. Fortunately, I have amazing, beautiful dancers, you know, that arrive, they're on point. They do African dance, they do ballet, they do jazz. Our process, the work talked about things that people don't want to talk about slavery, you know. It's not being taught in school almost anymore, where it's been, you know. The people don't talk about the posses, that's the black cowboy. You know, my great-grandfather was teaching me that, you know what I mean? She was talking about the Buffalo Soldier. That was very ancestral. So we try to put that into the work to talk about things people don't want to talk about. Being Black in prison, we do that work, you know. It's really, really soul shaking of what we do. I just hope that we keep traveling around the world to speak and not have to always preach, but speak the message, you know what I mean? I have that conversation when people have more patience to listen with their heart.
Keep doing the work. Here for it. Here for it. Yeah, and it's so much a part of, you have to create the environment and then you get to create the work. I remember working with a director once who was like, you know, predominantly white theater companies are going to need to start paying me a Black tax. So anytime you want to ask me about the culture or you want to ask me about what you're going to have to pay me a little bit more to do that work because you're asking me to create the environment before I can create the art. And I was like, damn, that's deep. So yeah, we're talking about those taxes, you know, extra work you're asking me to do. Jerron, Mary, Claudia, we'll go around this way. How are you using your art form to share what you're experiencing? And thank you, Antoine.
Okay, so I mean, that just set the tone so much, because if creating a space first, I was really drawn to this project, this micro commission, because I have an individualistic obsession with finding myself in the canon, the artistic and historical canon. And so I strive to re-envision and reimagine history with my body and with my composition. And I find that endlessly exciting and intriguing. With this micro commission to think about Beethoven, I, similarly to Mary, was trying to figure out what the embodiment would look like and think through that. I bought a wig, y'all. I bought a 18th century. And we were about to come through as Black Beethoven. But I also commissioned a friend, Jerome Ellis, who's a fantastic musician, disabled musician. And we were going to think through, the Black church as well came up in this idea of really like two questions: minstrelsy and productivity. I was really intrigued by, like, in my experience within art, that we don't get the chance to manage time how we see fit. The act of production and productivity is so straight and constrained that, like, you really don't get to feel your juices or feel your, you know, the seasoning, right? It just has to be so efficient. So I was really looking at that in my own personal experience. Thank you, Claudia, for that. Love that. And I was really going for that. So, like, that was like what I was looking at, productivity, and whether or not I could just indulge in a sense of pleasure alongside this what I interpreted Beethoven's heart, like, contending with, like, I gotta get this commission out. I have to make this composition by this date, but I'm not there as they want me to be there. And so that I really floated with that because there was and the anxiety around that was so palpable to me. But on another tip, I was investigating this idea of classical and the criticality of classicalness within the Black body, and how, you know, our vocabulary, even how we have like Black ballerinas or Black, you know, expressive modern dancers, we're still trying to create the apex within a silo that is Eurocentricized, that is, you know, that is still didn't take us into consideration in the making. So in a way, I kind of felt like his mastery of that, his resilience in creating his own vocabulary to kind of take on Antoine's interpretation, was mastery in a form that did not serve him. So you know, and so the minstrelsy comes out in that you have to produce even when you don't want to, put on that mask, put on that face, go out there, you know, make it happen, and then go back and cry, like, you know, cry to the Lord in your dressing room. But just that compulsion to do that, I think, happens because of environment. I mean, the critical language we have for disability now, Beethoven did not have. And so I can understand that he was where he was. But I also do blame our timelines for productivity and production for making it so. And so I was coming for all those things. Similarly, that's how I come for my art now. Like, I really think about the timeline and how to critique the timeline, and not to think that, and to kind of assume that what I'm giving in that time is rigorous, you know, even if it does not look how expected work should look. So I was really excited about all those things. But yeah, productivity within the arts itself, I'm just like, I mean, because it is, you know, it is propped by our, what's the word? Not prop. It's propped up by capitalism. It's propped up by folks who, you know, want to make money. So there is this urgency that does push creativity in a way that I think is unhelpful oftentimes. So as artists, we do have to kind of check that. And so, yeah. So that's
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it makes me think about the intersections of capitalism, grind culture, productivity culture, work worship, and then versus the natural human vulnerability of needing rest, of needing, you know, to be in touch with our own rhythms and our own language. And yet we are constantly being told to go, produce. So I have found in this moment radical rest, taking naps as a way to take down the capitalist system and disinvest from capitalist grind culture. But doing this with the perspective of, this is not providing accessibility. You know, for me, this isn't, for my community, this is not helping if we're constantly exhausted. So I just had to.
Because who are you gonna help? Who are you gonna help if you
pouring
also
from an empty cup? Okay, Mary. Wait, I think did I already pose it to you?
Yeah. What are we? I'm so lost. It's wonderful.
Sorry.
I feel like I have new family, and when I hear, this is how my brain works, is when I hear Antoine share and hear Jerron share, I am directing in my head. I'm seeing things and visualizing what this project could be with these bodies in space. It's like, yeah.
Oh,
so
amazing.
I get lost. I'm sorry.
I mean, that might even be a partial answer to the question. I think the question was originally, let me go back to my script. Okay. How do you use your art form as a way to share what you're experiencing? That was the question.
Oh, I feel like all the time.
Okay.
You know, because, you know, I remember in undergrad, you know, when you go to school with mostly, I went to mostly white institution, and you're only like maybe the Black person in your acting studio class, and everything is in like shades of gray. You're operating at a neutral, right? And then it's like, how can you approach this scene and be neutral? you know, but that's what sometimes the teachers would ask you to do. And I get it if it's a specific exercise to get you to a certain place, but then you go in and you're in a play, right? That doesn't apply. You don't approach a character as in like a neutral gray like space. It's you. I think it varies when you have a sense of pride. That Langston Hughes, I think, isn't there a poem called A Sense of Pride, like of who you are? And I've never felt ashamed, thank God, of who I am, where I came from, roots, being poor, not having it, still poor, not having feel like, what is it, a leg up, on life. And so with that came with a sense of pride. So I feel like I'm always approaching as far as where I am right here and now in my approach to work, whether I'm acting or if I'm directing, and even dramaturge, when you're working with a writer who's trying to figure out what story you're telling. And there's so many distractions, right? As far as like, okay, I'm back to, you're talking about this and you're talking about that, but what does this person trying to say? And why should we care about what they're saying? So I feel like I'm always where I am right here and now in my history. You can't get away from it. Maybe people might run, but at some point you're going to turn around and go right back to it. So when there are these places where it may be a challenge, is where I feel like I thrive, because I'm not afraid to look at it. And if I'm working with another artist, then I feel like I'm not doing my job if I'm not encouraging you to peel back some of that stuff. And I'm not talking about it has to be painful all the time. This is also joy. Accessing joy is also accessing pain. So there it is.
Yeah, just all the time, just like constant translation. I love it.
Yeah.
Claudia, I feel like you'll speak more about this, but I feel like your art form and what you're experiencing and what you're trying to say to the world is so intimately connected, and it's coming out in so many different ways. I just love to hear more about how are you sharing your experience with the world through your art.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I love the way you framed the question, because that's not what I think I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm creating performative scores for humans to engage in. So I'm co-creating performative scores for justice in real life performance. So when I connect with, for instance, Aurora Stage, and we do a big devising conversation about how are the audience members doing microaggressions against other audience members. That is an act of dismantling white supremacy culture. It's an act of dismantling ableist culture, but it's also an act of co-creating a different way of performing together. I'm deeply invested in that. So all of the theater I write, all of the theater I produce, it is a provocation and an invitation for everyone who is involved in the creation of that work and also in the reception of that work to go do better performances outside the theater. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, I was saying yes, please. Yes, please.
I also say this in my practice. I'm greedy, but also it's because I've always led a life of precarity, where you never know if the show actually is going to happen. You don't know if you're actually going to make it to the theater space. Maybe someone in your collaborative cohort is literally not going to be alive. Maybe financially folks will have to go do something else to make sure their life stuff is okay, and you can't make the art thing happen. So I try to have planning processes, development processes that are an artistic thing in and of itself. So that's a piece of the cultural producing is part of the creation of the artist. It's several phases of artistic practice. One is the creation of the work. One is the giving of the work to the community and that exchange. And then there's the third part of what comes after.
Like, love it. I feel like that needs to be a book, and like you need to be publishing that. because we're gonna need that. We're gonna need that, especially if we're gonna be thinking about how do we get performance into the community, as opposed to saying, community, come here where I am telling you what the art is. You know, how do we need the guidepost, you know, we need the map. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to our artist share. We have a little snippet of what Mary Hodges was working on for the micro commission. Mary, I'm gonna play it, but did you want to give a little, you know, tasty tidbit? I don't really know how to explain it, but something, you know, what's happening?
No, I think you can just play it in its entirety. But you know, I think for our panel, I think what you're going to hear is just the juxtaposition of what I think we're all in agreement of what we were talking about when we thought about this micro commission of what you can set. Yes. So I don't want to go on and on. I think you can just play it in its entirety, and you'll be hearing the voice. I do want to acknowledge the voiceover talent. It's Tom Martin is providing his vocals to the text.
Okay, here we go.
From Titus Andronicus. Come on, you thick-lipped slave. I'll bear you hence, for it is you that puts us to our ships. I'll make you feed on berries and on roots, and feed on curds and whey, and suck the goat, and cabin in the cave, and bring you up to be a warrior. And 13 May 1813. To forego what could be a great deed, and to stay like this, oh how different from a shiftless life, which I often pictured to myself. Oh terrible circumstances, which do not suppress my longings for domesticity, but prevent its realization. Oh God, look down upon the unhappy being. Do not let it continue like this any longer. From Ludwig von Beethoven.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for sending that along. It's so haunting when the music starts to come in. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm being transported into some other realm of experience and like memory. Gorgeous.
Thank you, Denzel Faison.
Yes, Denzel Faison.
Yes.
Did the sound design. So thanks, big shout out to Denzel. Woo woo.
Woo.
Oh, and there was a piece of artwork that you may have seen with the orange background, and there's like a young woman with the ponytail, and there's like a spark of, let me actually pull it up again so that you can see that image. That was the image that we had commissioned for the event. This is done by Jamie Todd, and she specializes in a type of inkscape design. And we wanted to have a list of invisible and visible disabilities so that we're celebrating the entire spectrum of these things, but also wanting to have something that is celebrating the community. So this is a piece by Jamie Todd, and we're so grateful for her contribution. Of course, this would have been presented in the space with, like, you know, just blown up to its biggest size. But yeah, so that's Jamie Todd. Woo woo, big shout out. And now I've got a Facebook Live, some stuff from Facebook Live. Questions. All right, this one's from Keith. Keith asks, as a parent of a disabled child actively engaged in the arts, I have found that the arts are empowering and a confidence builder. My question to the panel is, how do I maintain that level of engagement, and how best do I encourage her when she is challenged? Maybe Mary, we can start with you in response to this question.
And Chelsea, sometimes I think it might be helpful. I don't know if you can retype the question in the chat so then we can see it. Engagement, I don't know. I would say with how old, do we have an age? I would say, what is their truth? I think most parents know what their child's truth is, and also what makes them happy, their passions. And so my son has a tunnel vision, and he also has a few labels of his own that he can easily get obsessed on one particular thing. And right now it's soccer, football. And so it's tough trying to, from that, where do you go? What other tools, things of interests that can engage your child. And I would first start with the most passionate thing. And I was fighting against it, but then it doesn't work to fight against their number one passion. So you have to encourage that number one passion. And then from that, actually, it can bring you to other things, but you have to embrace what that passion is first and foremost. So if it's painting, if it's dance, you have to figure out a way to give that to them, to open the door for them. And there are ways, and there are many things, organizations, especially now in the digital age, there's endless possibilities. People are like throwing virtual stuff at children, and often it's for free. So I would encourage you to explore the rabbit hole of digital content and find what can engage your child with safety, because you have to like check it out and make sure that it's safe and that it's okay. So I hope I'm answering your question. So I would say start with the passion, what it is that they're passionate about. Embrace it and don't fight against it. And also don't let economics be a barrier. Because many times I would say, especially with the soccer, I feel like, this is an entitlement sport. I was really frustrated, especially when I was in New York, of finding places where he could play that I could afford. I couldn't afford most of the places. So it's like, why does soccer cost so much? Why is it so, and it's designed, many things are designed on purpose to keep us out. But I would talk to other parents, and I found clubs that would have maybe one day that was free, and sure enough, I would bring him. It wasn't always convenient, but it's a sacrifice that I feel it's our obligation to honor our children by finding something that that they're passionate about and find a way to help them. Because when I was younger, I didn't know what I was good at. I had no clue. So then I felt like I was just coasting right here below the middle, always. And it wasn't until I was an adult and after college that I found it. So that's my best advice.
Did anyone else, if you want to just raise your hand to just think about working with young people at a time like this and how to keep them engaged? Did anybody else want to hop in on that?
I have one dancer, she said she's deaf. And she said, when I grow up, I thought I was going to be hearing because I saw the world hearing, I think that when you don't bring anything to a child's face, they don't see the options they have. to who they can be and with the world that's really out there for them to be included. You know, the world for a Black deaf artist, dancer, I had to create that world, that stage. You know, that's where I created the Bay Area International Deaf Dance Festival. And there was the people that were brown wanted a space to feel, to be them, to be them. And all the children that come to see them, they get to be them, you know? Oh, I have the option to be a fireman. I have the option to be a dancer. While the world is still trying to say, no, no, you can't, you can't. You know, it's very interesting that some people who own a big business to provide scholarship to children, they will tell them that they can't have a future. They told my mom that I won't be able to own a business, you know. I wanted to learn how to dance and we needed some funding to be included in that. And they told my mom, you won't have a future, you won't have a business, you won't have a family. Like, first of all, what death have to do with having making babies, you know? You know what I mean? So because I seen it, I was like, wow, the National Association of the Deaf, when I saw the NBDA, that's abbreviated, you know, it was, wow, I saw Black deaf people. Wow. And that was in, you know, I saw that in DC. I had to work hard to make that happen here in the Bay Area to have our own chapter. They already had one in Oakland, then it fell down. And we have to find the people to create it, build it up again. You know, it's called Bay Area Black Deaf Advocates, you know. And now the children, Black children are feeling inspired. And I, as an adult, are feeling inspired, you know, and only the my children will have something to see what they can be, you know, to be, you know. And so now, I mean, like, how do we keep that going? Now I'm the vice president of the car. That's the Deaf Country Advocacy Referring, meaning that we have to find work for deaf people and their family and their children, find a place where they can learn sign language. We have to create that space. So most of the time, the board will be, you know, all white. So I don't know how many Black deaf before me with fight president. So I mean, we have a voice. I have to include myself in our space to be uncomfortable with, you know, more white and maybe Black to create a more space for Black. You know what I mean? And I mean, I have to say, like Bill T. Jones, Alvin Haley, you know, Dancy of Harlem, Arthur Mitchell, you know, gave me the inspiration that I can be the director. But I stalled them, you know, I didn't get to limit myself. And so I think pulling those children in a space where they can be and, you know, to who they be, it's like, that makes
Thank
sense.
you. Thank you, Antoine. That's, I mean, yeah, that's it. That's it right there. Jerron, did you want to throw something in? You good?
Well,
Okay.
I do want to just bring up for the parents. I really appreciated my folks for not being a barrier. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that, I love the word maintain the experience or maintain the enthusiasm. I think if we're talking about the intersectionality, Black parents are now being acculturated to talk about the challenges of being a Black person. So similarly, I think it's apropos for parents of disabled children to talk to them about the challenges of being disabled, and that can be part of their agency and part of their own education that can allow them the space that other people aren't giving them. You know, I think somehow knowing about prejudices, I was able to gauge whether or not I experienced the prejudice I was told. You know what I'm saying? And so like it gave me in my adolescence a way of moving freely. And so I would say in terms of maintaining that, talk to them like as they're going, talk to them about what might befall them in the future, but that I think in terms of what Mary was talking about, that they do have this internal right, you know, this internal understanding of themselves that will weather their storms. And I also think, Antoine, I also thought about the places that I wasn't, you know, and looked at those. Like I knew I wasn't in, being imaginative about places that I didn't see myself, and allowing others to think about like, oh, well, you don't see yourself there. Well, maybe you should be the one to be there. And that's how I began to look at the world as well. So that's all.
Claudia, did you have anything to chime in with?
I always do, but my colleague that just dropped such beautiful science, I would say this really fast. Oftentimes we have the instinct to say no on behalf of someone else to save ourselves pain. Sometimes we'll even say no on behalf of someone else to feel more in control of something. So if you're a young person who does not see yourself reflected or represented in any of the leadership or embodied positions of the thing that you're interested in doing, if the people who are creating that work and creating the invitations for you to participate in that work are also giving you a bunch of microaggressions and subtly telling you this is not for you, you're probably not going to be good at this, you shouldn't do this, yeah, that young disabled person is going to stop being so motivated to do that work and be inspired, and might not have the capacity to tell all of the stories that help you to understand why they're not in it anymore. So I feel like folks just need to do as Jerron's parents did. Keep watching Antoine Hunter do that. Listen to Mary, and don't say no on behalf of others. In fact, fight for your yes.
I have to say, you know, many people don't look at Black women, but those are my role models as the Black deaf people, you know what I mean, as the Black deaf person. Those, my mom, single mom, five children, Michelle Obama, you know what I mean? Those are my role models. You know, I'm really hoping that just my future is to see more Black women deaf to have a space. Black, we have to add that. Black women with disabilities to have this space, you know, because it made me stronger who I am. You know, that's short thing. I want to see more of that.
And thinking in this neo-futurist, Afro-futurist vein of what does it look like when we allow people to just be, when we don't create structures that disable them, when we allow the environment to be created in such a way that we can shine in our full, whole self, pleasured selves. You know, what does that look like, and how can we create that space? We are at time. We've come to the end of our time together. But I think that we've come up with some really, really concrete things that I'm so grateful that people got to hear. You know, they got to hear straight from the root, straight from the source, and there's just so much potential for us to create something new, as opposed to try and fix something old and dead and not helping, right? Going into the future together. So thank you to everyone on this call who, oh wait, let me see. Oh wait. Oh, okay. I just got another Facebook Live question. Y'all wanna, should I put this out there? All right. I'm gonna put it out. Okay, yeah. Okay, so someone wants to know on the Facebook Live chat. This is from Lynette. Have any of you had an experience that was great and then hit rock bottom? how did you do, or what drove you to get back up? And I'm gonna put this in the chat. So if you've had a time where you've hit rock bottom, and what drove you to get back up? That's from Lynette.
No one wants to remember rock bottom. That's the pain. I will say this without divulging too much. There was a time period where I felt that I was at the bottom, and my son was maybe 3, and I put up these affirmations on the wall, and I felt like I felt like I actually came to some kind of peace, the most peace I've ever had, because I felt, and people, I mean, this is live on public, but people don't know this about me, but I felt the ancestors saying I was going to be okay. And that also what drove me to put the affirmations on the wall. And that, you know, that we've been through it. We've gone through it so you can be here. So you are going to be okay. You just have to keep the faith and keep saying these affirmations, and you will rise up. So that's real. Our DNA, or where we come from, our spirit. We've come, and we're going to keep coming and keep rising. We may not always like make it there, but it's steps. And I think you have to have some kind of belief system, something. Otherwise, I mean, just stay on the couch and stay out of everybody else's way. That's how I feel about
it. Yeah, is there anyone else who wanted to chime in on that one? Rock bottom, coming out of rock bottom.
I make sure that if I find myself in that position, to get to a place that inspires me. So I seek out inspiration, but I think that I seek out work as a way to see that people did work, to remind me that things are still coming to fruition. And similarly, I think there's a way in which, you know, you manifest after the fact. And so I just needed a reminder that things do continue being made.
Okay, you are the weather that continue to evolve. Yeah, you have the rainy day, you have the sunny day, the rainbow. You know, you just have to continue this time for beautiful, to know that you're beautiful even on the ugly day. You know what I mean? You're beautiful on the beautiful days, you're beautiful on the ugly days, and continue. All of you have a story. That rock bottom is another story, you know, to climb up and stay another story. You know what I mean? To fly is another story. To crawl is another story. You know, I hope you have your legacy you want to continue. Hope that when you get into another form, that legacy, that story continue to keep moving around in a circle. You know what I mean? And I just have to say that, you know, a caterpillar that crawls and get into the cocoon, and you have no help. If someone open it up for that caterpillar, maybe their wings will be too big that they don't know how to fly. So they have to work themselves to get out of that cocoon, and then when they open up, to really know how to fly, you know, and have all that beautiful thing that's there. So I just say, that's your story.
Rock bottom is a myth. There is no rock bottom, And there is no tippity top where you'll always be forever and ever and you're safe. This is what it is to be alive. And if you're lucky, and if you have a lot of intention, you can build a practice that has resilience. You can build a community that will help you recognize when you're down and will help you to get back up. I feel like it's, this is the story of being alive and being a human on earth. So it's a beautiful question. And I think Antoine just dropped some beautiful poetry. Thank you.
Oh, it's just so enriching. And the fact that this is Mental Health Awareness Month and that we receive that question at this point in the conversation, to me speaks to one of the things that we can be doing for each other right now is reaching out when you have a question, reaching out when you're feeling that what you perceive as rock bottom, or what feels like rock bottom to you, that that there are people. And in this hyper connected moment, it feels like it might be just a little bit easier to send that text message or send that direct message and get that assistance, because we're here, we're all here, all the time. So reach out.
I just want to
Amazing.
add.
Yes, please, Mary.
That the couch thing being cold. If you can't get up off the couch, ask for help. Ask for help.
Yep. So thank you, Claudia, Mary, Jacinda, Kathleen, Antoine, Jerron, NBT, Sade, Nia, everybody. Thank you for just coming together and answering the call and saying, yes, I want to help. I want to be a part of creating space, creating the environment, building that foundation. So I thank you so much for your generosity and for listening and giving and hearing and healing with your heart. It's really such a gift. If you like what we do here at NBT, follow us on all the social media channels. Sign up for our what is it called when you send out an email, an e-blast, and my brain is a little fried right now. But get on that list, and we'll send you emails and tell you what's going on. Thank you, Mary. And we have a choice in how we rise, but we don't get to choose fear, according to the words of Sade Lithcott, our CEO. So take that with you as we journey forward. Much love, much peace, much rest, much pleasure to you all.
Incredible love to you, Chelsea.
Yes. So that's us.